Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're doing the assembling of that cute pattern that we did in the last video. Now to start the assembling, we're going to do it with the underarm pieces. We should have 4 of them, 2 for the inside, 2 for the outside. And the first seam we're going to do is for both pair. We're going to assemble at 1 centimeter. Then you're going to open and do an understitch, sending the seam allowance towards one side and top stitch at 1 millimeter. When you do your second pair, make sure you do the opposite side because you need a left side and a right side. And to make sure there's no confusion, refer to your double notch that you place at the bottom seam. Now my 2 underarm pieces are sewn, and if you could see, the underarm stitch is done. I hope you noticed that before doing the underarm stitch, I did notch the seam allowance, all the curve area, so almost everywhere, before doing my underarm seam. And I have a left side now and a right side. Another way you could do the difference if you cannot see the notch because you're doing lace like me is by placing a pin at the underarm seam so you could see that your front is shorter and the back is longer. Now we'll be ready for the second piece. We'll assemble the yoke for the neck. So you have 2 pieces that you're going to place face to face, and you're going to assemble the neck from center back all the way to center back. Then you're going to notch all the curve area, notch also the V at the front, all the way to about 2 or 3 millimeter from the seam. Then you'll be able to flip and do your understitch on one side, sending the seam allowance in the direction of your top stitch, and do your understitch at 1 millimeter from the seam. We could now continue with the big piece. So I place my back here. You could notice a little difference is that I had to do a center back seam, but I did had my 1 centimeter seam allowance before on my pattern. So you're going to place your back good side up and your front piece right over and assemble both seam allowance of the side seam. Now that your neck yoke is sewn with the understitch all around, we're going to close the center back seam because this part is not done yet. But before doing it, I want you to insert a little loop for the closure of the top part. So you could use what I call the mobilon. It's an elastic but transparent. I use the 1/4 inch or 4 or 5 millimeter wide. Or you could also use the elastic thread that is very tiny, or a round one but not too thick. And you're going to cut more than enough here, about 10 centimeter, and then do a knot at one end. So you create a loop, and when you stitch it down, you're sure that your elastic is not going to come out. Same thing if you use the mobilon, make your loop and knot the open side. Now for the assembling of the loop with the neck piece, you're going to turn it so you have the back side over. Usually for women, we close the right side over the left side. So you take your right side and you're going to flip it so you have good side of the fabric facing the good side of the fabric. And what we want to do is insert the little loop between the 2 layers. make sure that your knot is going to be inside the seam allowance area, and you're going to flip it over so you could just assemble at your normal seam allowance. The other side will just be fold right side to right side and assemble all the way. I'm planning to put a little self-covered button right over after. The following step is going to be a preparation step to assemble the underarm piece with the bodice. So I place them wrong side with wrong side, fold it in the final position, and I just stitch them together at the edge at about 5 millimeters just to hold them together to be ready to put them in the bodice. Now my bodice is assembled back and front together. So now I'm going to assemble the underarm piece with the armhole. Find your underarm notch on the little underarm piece and place it good side with good side at the armhole. And you're going to assemble from the back to the front, and same thing on the other armhole. Now the yoke is sewn, and if you remember to turn the corner and make it nice right away, you're going to send all seam allowance in the same direction. Put your thumb inside and hold all the seam allowance for the thickness. Then you could push it out and get your nice corner the first time. Now you could see my little loop, very strong because of the knot. We're now ready to assemble the yoke with the bodice. What I want you to do is in the front, take a chalk and trace your neckline, the V neckline in the front, so you could cut or notch the V until about 3 millimeters from the seam line. Now on the right side of the fabric, I'm still on the front, take a chalk again and indicate the intersection of your V. Now take your yoke. We're going to assemble only one side at the time, so the good side or the outside of the yoke to the front. We're going to place them right side with right side, and to make sure you position it at the right place, I want you to take a chalk over here also and just indicate to get the exact intersection. Now take a pin, put it at the intersection and overlap with the intersection of the bottom piece. Push it all the way to the end. You're going to pivot the yoke, and at the sewing machine you're going to sew from this intersection all the way to the top part of the front. And for the other side, we're going to do it with a second seam. You're going to start a little bit before the corner, so maybe 2 centimeters before. You're going to sew until the intersection, then take the yoke and pivot it, so you'll be able to sew the other side the same way you did on the top one, on the first side, all the way to the top of the front. Here to assemble my yoke, I hope you notice that I start with the yoke on top, at the corner all the way up, and then I turn it around. I started over about 2 centimeters before the point. At the point, I put my needle down. I created a pleat with the excess of fabric, and then I continue my seam all the way to the other end. Now we still have to assemble the yoke at the back area. So again, you're going to have to do it in 2 steps, because we're assembling only one layer, the outside layer, to the bodice for now. So place your yoke good side with good side. Send the seam allowance of the yoke on the opposite direction, so the side that you're not sewing. Place your center back right at center back, and you're going to sew the round part until the end of the back area. And you do that for both sides. Now you could see that I did assemble my back yoke, my back neck yoke to the bodice, and I wanted to show you that the inside part is still loose. I only assembled the top part to the bodice to the center front, so you could see it clearly over here. And my next step is going to be to finish the outside of the yoke over here, and I'm going to do it from the bottom seam of the underarm piece to after or right at the seam of the underarm piece. I did this side already so you could see. I'm going to show you the inside. So now you could see the inside, and you could see that it's still loose at the center front and it's still loose at the back, but all the armhole part is done nice and clean. Now how we're going to do it, I'm going to show you on the other side. So on the wrong side of the garment, you're going to place the yoke clean at the armhole part, matching the notch. You should have 2 notches to match the beginning and the end of this little piece. So I have my notch right there, matching the seam, just like that. So you fold it in, and you're going to go between the 2 layers, grab the seam allowance. Now we know we could pull it out and assemble from that first notch. See, my second notch is right there, and we could sew. I'm going to pull it to be able to sew and push it back in as soon as I sew it. I could show you like that, and as soon as you sew a little bit, you could push it back in and pull some more to sew all the way to the end of the armhole yoke in the front. So starting in the back, finishing in the front. Now once your seam is finished, you end up with a tube with the fabric inside, but you could just go from the other side and pull it out, and you're going to end up with a nice finishing for your armhole inside and outside. To complete your project, you will need to do your hem for sure, but also you need to hold down the part of the facing that is not sewn yet. And what I would do for this one, I would just stitch them together, all the open part. Don't fight too much with the fabric here. Just bring it down with an angle, just like that. Sew them back at 1 centimeter, all the layers together. You're going to do it for the back. You could do in one shot. And then for the front also, just bring it down in an angle and go from one side all the way to the other. And your little dress will be finished. That's it for today. I hope you enjoy. Make sure you share my video, and I see you next time. Thanks for watching.